Hey guys, welcome back to releasethecraftin. Priscilla here with another episode of Storycraft. Hope that you guys are doing well and that you are ready to listen. This is going to be a long story, so make sure you have all of your snacks. I'm really excited to share it with you today. It is the completely unassuming, uninspired title of Young Woman, Young Man. And actually, there's a lot of titles. This could also be known commonly, I guess, as Ileana of the Golden Tresses or Ileana Simsiana, which, as you'll see, are also kind of sort of uninspired titles. But we'll get into why that is, I guess, a little bit at the end. I want to jump into this one because, like I said, it is a long one. It's kind of crazy, but I think that you guys will love it because I absolutely love it. I think it's wild. So I hope that you guys enjoy. So just as a little bit of history, prehistory, I don't know how to describe it. This is a Romanian fairy tale. It was written down and collected by Peter Iperescu, and I'm hoping that is pretty close. I have so far been pronouncing all of the Eastern European words with confidence because I'm a Leo. I don't really know why. But this was recorded sometime between 1872 and 1886. It was also taken down by Andrew Lang in the Violet Fairy book, which is where I found it. And I'm going to be using his version as my sort of definitive version to go off of because I have access to that book and I don't have access to the one by Peter. So we're going to be jumping into it. I'm also going to use his pronunciation or the pronunciation that Andrew Lang has because, like I said, it's the one I'm most familiar with, but I'll also explain what it means at the end. You'll see it. I want to tell you what it is now because it'll just sort of spoil things. So back in the way long ago, there used to be an emperor, and this emperor, in addition to being a great conqueror of all of the lands, was also a dick because he wouldn't stop conquering people. Even after he beat them, he was like, no, I'm not done beating you, until they offered up the heir to the throne, the prince of the kingdom, into his service for 10 years. So he was like, I am an emperor, I have a giant empire, and every kingdom I encounter, I will stomp on relentlessly until you give me your son as my servant for 10 years, which is strange and problematic, probably. I'm not going to read too deep into it because the story doesn't, but I'm just saying it's not a good look if you're an emperor. Like, you could have asked for anything else other than somebody's kid. Also maybe assuming that these are like small sons. They're adult size of marriageable age sons, I'm assuming, because that's how we tell stories on this channel. But on the border of this empire, there was a great warrior king who, in his youth, resisted the emperor's advances easily. Like, he was like, you can't catch me. Like, I'm so good at this war thing. Like, you're never going to conquer this kingdom. Unfortunately, youth doesn't last forever, and this king began to get older and older, and as the years went on, he got a lot more tired of waging war and a lot less good at it, to the point where it was very obvious that he was going to be defeated, and it was very depressing to him because he didn't want to, admit that he was getting too old to defend his kingdom, but also had a very huge dilemma because for him, this war would never end. Even if he was completely defeated, all of his forces were wiped out, and there was nothing to go on with, because, remember, the emperor is a dick, and demands, like, a young boy to be his servant, in this arrangement, or he won't cease his conquering. But this king doesn't have a son. He has 3 daughters. Not a single boy child to his name. So he's like, fuck, what do I do? So he just spends most of his time, like, moping around, being like, oh, I used to be such a great war hero, and now all I got is 3 daughters to show for it. Like, woe is me and my ill luck. And eventually, his daughters start to notice that he is acting like a sad Sally, and they're like, Dad, what's up? Like, what's going on? And he's like, no, it's not a big deal. Like, you wouldn't understand. You're just little girls, and all you know is, like, weaving and sewing, and you don't understand how things work. And they're like, try us, like maybe tell us and maybe we'll understand. And he's like, no, you couldn't possibly with your little girl brains, there's no way. And they're like, hey, actually, just tell us, because what's the worst that can happen? You tell us and we don't understand? Like, what if we did understand? That's also a possibility. Just freaking tell us. So he's like, okay, fine. Like, you don't have to twist my arm about it. Like, oh my God, you guys talk so freaking much. I'll tell you, but you're not going to get it. So he explains the situation to his daughters, who, of course, because they're not dumb, understand perfectly. Turns out this knowledge was not gatekept by only the men. They understood it just fine. And the eldest daughter listens to this and immediately goes, well, I know the solution. I'll go. And he's like, you're not a boy. And she's like, I don't care. I'll go and I'll solve this problem for you. So she spends a couple of days getting a bunch of supplies together. She gets enough supplies for an entire year to go to the emperor's palace, which seems like a lot of supplies. It's actually so many supplies she needed like an entourage to come with her, because in addition to getting like provisions for a year, she also got all of her fancy dresses, all of her gems, and all the gold she had, and loaded these up into this huge entourage. Then she went down to the stables and she picked the most spirited horse in the stable, who has a beautiful coat of silver, and then she picks out some silver armor for herself, and she's like, okay, I am finally ready to go. I am dressed to the nines. I have all my stuff packed. Like, I'm ready to go. And the dad's like, okay, this doesn't seem like a great idea, but go off. You have my blessing. Don't embarrass yourself. And she's like, I won't. So she takes off, and she goes so fast, because remember, her horse is super spirited, that she actually ends up leaving her entourage in the dust. And this would be a good time, a little aside, to say that none of the girls actually knew what made their dad such a splendid war hero. Oh my God, a splendid war hero. Words are really hard. Trademarked, copyright, registered. They didn't know what made him such a great warrior. And it turned out to be that their dad was also a sorcerer, like a low-key sorcerer, like for real. And he takes a secret shortcut so that he can get ahead of his daughter, and then sees a stream. He casts a spell that causes this copper bridge to appear across the stream, making it basically the only way you can get over this stream unless you want to go around for miles. And then he turns himself into a wolf, and he waits underneath the bridge for her arrival. And about 30 minutes later, she arrives, because, of course, she's way ahead of everybody, but also behind her dad, because he's got magic. And he starts to crawl out from underneath the bridge. He puts one paw onto the bridge, and she panics and screams. Her horse is like, fuck this shit, leaps so violently to the side that it almost throws her, and then runs all the way back to the castle, and they actually make it back before the entirety of her entourage can get all the way out of the castle. So, the dad, of course, because he's magic, is already back there, and he's like, you stupid idiot, I told you this wasn't going to work. And she's like, oh my God, you're so right, I was not prepared. And, he just continues to belittle her while being like, it's okay, you're a girl, I understand. You wouldn't have understood how to do this. You can't do this. So the middle child processes what's happened to her sister, and she's like, okay, give me a couple of days, I'm going to get this together. She decides to take only half a year's worth of possessions and provisions, but she leaves out the dresses and the jewels, but she takes all the money, all the money she can possibly pocket for all of her expenses, because of course she's going to need the money, right? And she also finds herself a very sturdy and calm, very calm, old brass colored horse. And the father did the same thing again. He gave her his blessing, sent her on his way, snuck out the back of the castle, went around the back way to meet her at the bridge, changed into a wolf, and waited for her. And she gets there, but it takes her a much longer time. She's not burdened by her entourage, because she didn't need an entourage this time. She's burdened by the fact that she chose a very slow, calm, sedate horse who was like, I'm not in a hurry. Are you in a hurry? I'm definitely not in a hurry. So the father waits. Eventually she comes, so he comes out from underneath the bridge, all in his wolf form. He gets about halfway onto the bridge when she's like, absolutely not. I actually decided I don't want any part of this. Fuck this shit. I'm out of here. And she turns around and she takes off. So she goes back to the palace. When she gets home, the dad is already there waiting for her. He's like, oh my God, what happened? And she's like, you won't believe it. That wolf was bigger than I thought. I knew it was there, and I was still too terrified to cross. And he's like, it's okay, I understand. You're just a silly girl with a little girl brain. Like, how could you possibly handle seeing a wolf? So at this point, everyone's kind of like side-eyeing the third princess, and they're like, what are you gonna do? And she doesn't do anything. She stays very quiet. She doesn't join the conversation, and she actually gets even more quiet as the days go by and starts to be like very obviously super introspective. Like she's weighing a lot of her options and sort of going over what's happening in her head. And they're like, what's going on with her? Like, why won't she say anything? She's being so weird. And eventually, she sort of comes back and she tells her dad, I will go. I will dress up as a man and I will go as a prince and we will end all of this struggle. I'm going to do it. And her dad's like, well, I guess you can try, but your sister's already failed. And she's like, I'm not fucking them. I've thought about this. I know exactly what I want to do. This is what I want to do. And I will do this. Whether or not you believe in me, I will in fact go out there and cut up any devil I have to prove that I am dedicated to this cause. I will become the devil if I have to prove how dedicated I am to this cause. At which point the king is like, well, okay, all right, that's a lot of feelings for someone who wasn't very chatty up until right now. So he lets her go and then tells her like, okay, like you can go, but when you fail, like, don't be upset, you know, just sort of take it in stride and try not to be too embarrassed. And she's like, I'm not gonna fucking fail. If you could stop shitting on all of us before we started this quest, maybe we'd have more success. And Dad's like, well, I don't know about that. I have a great boy brain. I do boy brain things. So she puts on the clothes of a man and she goes straight down to the stables, deciding that she's gonna need to pick a horse and an old man to advise her on how to be a boy. Those are the most important steps to her, so that's what she does first. So she goes through and she looks at all the horses, and she can't pick one that she likes the best until she gets to the very end of the stable, all the horse stalls, and she sees that her father's old war horse is sort of just sitting on the hay, like chilling. And she's like, you know what, this is the horse I need, because it has all the experience. It's been in tons of battles, like, this is the horse I need. What she didn't know, but is about to find out immediately, is that this horse is also magically sorceress. That was part of the secret to her father's success. He's a sorcerer. He has a horse that's a sorcerer. They're sorcerers together. And because the horse is a sorcerer, it can also speak. So it congratulates her on her good sense and is like, that's a very smart choice. Picking the horse with the most experience is a very smart choice. But unfortunately, I am super pitiable right now. Like, look at how skinny and ugly looking I am. It's because your father has, like, neglected his duty to take care of me and nobody's, like, coming to check on the king's horse for some fucking reason. So I'm just sitting here wasting away like a shadow of my former self. And I can only come back, you know, if somebody would take care of me in the manner in which I need to be taken care of. And she's like, I can do that. I can take care of a horse, like, for sure. And the horse is like, okay, but you have to understand, like, I need a very specific treatment plan. And she's like, lay it on me. So the horse is like, every day I need to be rubbed down in the morning and in the evening with rainwater, fresh rainwater. And she's like, okay, it's not raining, but I'll see what I can do. And he's like, and second, I need you to boil my barley and milk for my old teeths, because my teeths are old and I am old and I need this. And she's like, I get it, you're old. I boil your barley and milk. It's fine. It's not a big deal. And he's like, and thirdly, I need someone to wash my hooves in oil so that they may sparkle once again. And she's like, oh, that's it? Like, you want me to wipe you down, feed you, and take care of you? Like, yeah, I got it. I can do that. So every day, the princess does this for an entire week, and at the end of the week, the horse looks better than it's ever looked before. It is fat, it is healthy, and it tells her, I will serve and advise you. You don't need to go find yourself an old man. I will serve and advise you because you have taken such good care of me. And now, the prince used to be the princess, but now they are a prince, dons their armor, takes a meager pack with just a week's worth of clothes and, like, supplies, and a couple of gold coins in case of emergencies, and they depart. And on the road, the horse tells the prince that it will serve them better than it ever served their father, as long as the prince does everything that the horse says. And then the prince is like, Not a problem. You haven't steered me wrong so far, so like I'm all in. So they agree. Now they are best of buddies. And on the road, they finally make it down, through the woods to the copper bridge. And when they get there, the wolf is there. Now, having fully emerged from under the bridge, entirely in body on the bridge, the prince can see that this wolf is huge. It is hungry. It is lean, like it's been starving, and it is super mean. And inside, the prince feels a great rush of fear, but the horse says, don't fear, keep your courage, and they charge at the wolf. And when they charge at it, the wolf sees the sword, takes one look at it, leaps away, and runs off into the woods, and they continue riding on. Now remember, the wolf is the king, and the king is like a little bit proud, like, oh, okay, like you made it past the first test. I'm a little impressed because none of your sisters did, so let's see what happens. So the king rushes ahead, sets up a bridge of silver, and changes into the shape of a lion. And not just any lion. We're talking like Aslan-sized lion. Giant lion waiting on a bridge made of silver. So that this way, when the prince and the horse arrive, the earth starts to rumble and the trees start to shake with the giant roar of this huge lion. And this time the prince, who did again feel a bunch of fear, didn't actually need to be encouraged to charge ahead. They doubled down with their spurs, launched the horse forward, and the lion very narrowly evaded the sword in the charge. And at this point, it's pretty, I think we can all just sort of agree that the horse knows that the king is a sorcerer, and probably has already put two and two together that the wolf and the lion are the king. And probably, since they fought together for so long, knows kind of how the king's mind works. So the horse tells the prince to like stay the course because another battle is for sure coming up. And this time they get to a third crossing, and this is a bridge made entirely of gold, and upon it is a dragon with 12 heads, which to me is no longer a dragon, it's a hydra. The story says dragon. I'm not going to argue with this story. I'm just saying 12 heads, hydra. But the prince gasps in fear, and the horse says, don't fear, you've already beaten a wolf and a lion, you can do this. At which point, the prince feels sort of a steeling of the nerves, a hardening of the heart, and launches into battle again. And this fight lasts for an entire hour. It is nonstop. It is brutal. It's bloody, but after the end of this hour, the prince is finally able to cut one of the heads off the dragon, at which point the dragon roars with like an ear-splitting roar which stops them in their tracks, and then the dragon splits itself into two, falls to the ground, and arises as the king. And here's where I, as like the storyteller, need to pause and be like, what part got cut off when this head got cut off? The story never tells me. So I'm inclined to believe like the king just casually lost a finger or something and isn't talking about it. But at any rate, the king reveals himself to the prince and commends them on their bravery, their success, and says, as long as you listen to your horse, you will not fail on this journey, gives them their blessings, and they depart down the road. So while they continue on the road, they run into two genies, and that's Genie I, like octopi, genii, sort of genies, which is like the plural for genius. I did not know this when I started. So this is two geniuses, or genies. And they're like sort of conjurer type magical creatures, sometimes giant size, and sometimes they're just like known as like the spirits that influence people. There's not a lot of lore behind this. It's sort of like a pre-Islam term for genie, but not like a wish-granting genie. It may also represent like a house spirit or a spirit of place. So there's some murkiness there. For the sake of this story, they're going to be super giant magical creature people. So use your imagination. And these two genii were in a fierce battle. Like, they were beating the shit out of each other, but not very successfully. And when they see the prince, they call out, and this is the first time we get a name for the prince. It's Fet Fronters, and I'm going to do my best to say that. I may end up just shortening it to Fet, because succinctness is key when you have speech issues. they call out fet fronters. The first one says, I'll give you a horn that can be heard from miles away if you beat this guy. And the other one says, fet fronters, I'll give you my best horse by name of Sunlight if you beat this guy. And fet fronters leans down to the horse. The horse is like, go for Sunlight, because that's actually my younger brother. That horse is conveniently my younger brother, so go for that one. And the prince is like, all right, bet, and takes their sword and absolutely cleaves the other genius's head, like, off, like, killed the guy. And the remaining genius is like, amazing, why don't you come to my house, I'll get you that horse. And, you know, fet fronters and the horse follow this genius home. When they get there, they are introduced to the genius's mother, and they offer the prince a room to rest. And the mom is convinced that the prince is really a princess. And she's like, this princess is strong, confident, capable, brave, sort of amazing, low-key a beauty. You should marry her. And the genius is like, don't be stupid, Mom. Anyone that can fight like that is clearly not a woman. And so the mom's like, okay, I will prove it to you. And the horse, who is a horse, has horse hearing, hears all of this conversation while the prince is getting him ready to put in the stable, and is like, watch out, because they're going to play tricks to try to catch you as a woman. You can't let them catch you, so be aware of what's happening. Don't fall for any tricks. So the prince stays super alert. That night, the mom comes in. She brings a vase of flowers into the room with the prince and says, these are for you just to decorate your space. And then she goes to her son's room. She puts the same vase of flowers in there. And she's like, look, idiot, this is magical flowers. These flowers, super magical, okay? If they're in the presence of a woman, they'll stay fresh and beautiful and fragrant. If they're in the presence of a man, they'll wilt and they'll die. So I'm going to put these in your room so that you can see in the morning they're going to be dead because you're a man. And when we go check their room, we're going to see that's a woman. And the genius is like, all right, we'll see if you're right. I still think you're wrong, though. And they go to bed. That night, the prince gets up, takes the fresh flowers, walks them into the genius's room, switches the vases out, takes the dead wilted flowers back to their room, and goes back to sleep. So in the morning, the mom gets up early before everybody. She runs into the prince's room, sees the flowers are dead, and is like, what? That's not what I expected. So they take off, and she goes to her son's room, and in her son's room are also dead flowers because he was still a boy the entire night. So then she's like, okay, no, that didn't work. And the genius, when he wakes up, is like, the proof is in the pudding. The prince is a man. Like I said, no girl can wave a sword like that. And the mom's like, no, I'm not convinced. Now you're going to take them for a walk in the garden, because if you go through the garden, a girl will certainly pick the flowers. If it's not a girl, then they won't pick the flowers. So the genius takes the prince through the garden, starts showing them all the flowers. They're like, aren't these lovely? Feel free to pick any that you like, any that call to you, any that catch your eye. And the prince looks at the genius and is like, why the fuck are we wasting our time with flowers? What's that about? So then the genius goes back to his mom and he's like, again, you were wrong. This man is the manliest man. He didn't even care to look at him. He thought we were wasting our time. And the mom is like, I have one more trick. Take this prince into our armory and tell them to pick out a weapon. If they pick out one of the heavily ornamental, super jeweled, not sharp weapons, that's a girl, because girls don't know good weapons. But if they pick out any of the decent weapons in there, then we'll know for sure that this is a man. So the genius is like, okay. So they take the prince down to the armory and they're like, you can have any weapon as a reward for saving me and being so cool. And so the prince looks around, sees all these really fancy gold blades with like gem encrusted like hilts and scabbards, and is like, okay, what about that musty old saber right there, that dusty old antique looking one? That with like the really plain hilt and nothing going on. It looks like it needs a polish, actually. It looks really sharp. I would like that. And the genius is like, well, you can have it. And then goes right back to his mommy. And he's like, Mom, they've passed every test. This is the manliest of men. And the mom still isn't convinced, but can't find any like holes in this armor, so to speak, decides that, she's going to let the issue drop. The prince announces that they are going to be taking their horse on the morrow, and the next morning they saddle up Sunlight, who is a beautiful horse, who, if you can't guess, is the color of the sun, radiant, resplendent, younger, and the old horse tells the prince to listen to Sunlight, who is young, but also very, very wise, and he's going to go home and retire as his happy horse self should, because he's an old war horse who deserves a break, and really didn't have it in him to do, like, all the stuff that the prince is going to have to do going forward. And the prince is like, what does that mean? And he's like, you'll see. And he just gallops the fuck out of there. And the prince jumps on to Sunlight and begins the journey towards the emperor's palace. And on the road, Sunlight swears that they're going to be as loyal as their brother was, as long as they listen to everything that they're told. And the prince says, I will listen to everything you tell me. So thanks for the loyalty. Let's get this show on the road. And on the way to the emperor's palace, they find in the middle of the path a little curl of golden hair, and the prince is like, what do I do with that? And Sunlight says, pick it up, because if you leave it, you'll regret it, but when you pick it up, you're also gonna regret it, so you might as well just pick it up. Like, rather do that than leave it and have the regret of never having it. So the prince is like, well, that seems like it sucks either way, but I guess so. Okay, great. So the prince picks up the curl of hair, attaches it to a necklace that he wears under his armor, and they journey on until they finally make it to the emperor's palace, where he immediately swears himself in a service as a page. And don't hate me, guys, but that's where I'm going to pause the story. This is going to be a two-parter, which I have never done before. But like I said, this is a long story, and yeah, I have to break it up right here. So tune in next time for the second part to the young woman, young man story. And I hope that you guys don't hate me for this, but it's a super long story, and yeah, we're going to be here for like an hour, so part 2, coming soon. I will catch you guys on the next one. If you made it to the end of the video, I appreciate your faces. I appreciate your faces even more if you come back for part 2. And until next time, guys, happy crafting. Bye!